Innerworld with J.C. Egan. That's coming up next, right here on The Right Stuff. Hi, and welcome to The Right Stuff. I'm the Queen, Parker J. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, we're going to be talking to my guest co-host and contributor today, J.C. Egan. He is the author of his newest release called Innerworld. It's a satire about children's books. We'll talk about it in just a few moments. As always, I want to thank you for your support. We have been showcasing Christian authors worldwide for 10 years. As God gives us grace, we'll continue to do so. To find out how you can help out, simply go to patreon.com/rightstuff and see what you can do. And as always, we covet your prayers. To stay up to date with PJC Media, simply go to pjcmedia.net, click that pink follow button, and you'll never miss a show. Also, subscribe to our new YouTube channel for updates, uploads, and more. Go ahead, subscribe today. And so, without further ado, I'm going to bring my guest on board. JC, how you doing today?
I'm fine. I'm relaxed. My voice is a little hoarse, and that has to do with medication I take. I'm a former bass player, so therefore I have an opioid problem. Little joke. It's just something that I remember from Third Rock from the Sun.
Oh gosh, I haven't seen that in it forever.
So I have a spinal condition now, and so I can't do a lot of the stuff I used to do. I had a 30-year theatrical career as an actor and director and stage manager. And that involved a lot of physicality because you don't have a stunt double, and there's a lot of in Shakespeare there's a lot of fighting, and there's a lot of falling, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And I've had set pieces fall on my head, and I've done the Passion Play 12 years and been pushed around and shoved around and all this stuff. So you got to learn how to fall. You got to learn how to do all the same things that stunt people do. And also you have to learn how to fight on stage, which is very different than in real life. You learn all these moves, and it turns out you're learning martial arts, and but the sword in your hand, but you're doing the same kind of blocking and moving and holding their center of gravity and what have you. And it's fascinating, and I've gotten to do a lot of it, and it is very physical. And then I went from there. Continued to do the acting, but I started working for my church in the music production, helping organize the worship leadership, having them get their musicians they wanted, the songs they wanted, having rehearsals, and then getting the equipment up on, because we were using an auditorium from a school. And that was a lot of heavy lifting. So after 50, my spine said no more, and that was it. And I've had to deal with that ever since. It's a permanent issue. It's nothing I can have operated on. It's nothing it'll just go away. And of course, I'm 60 now, so I don't see any reason to think that I'm not going to continue getting arthritis or continue getting, as you grow older, your body starts to do that kind of stuff. So I've always been writing. I've written plays, a lot of plays. I've written some screenplays. I've been hired to write on screenplays. And I've been doing that for about as long as I can remember. As long as I learned how to write, I would write little short stories or silly poems or silly skits that my friends and I would do on tape recorders. All that kind of stuff I did until I got into school and became an English major, and then did very well as a writer in junior high school. And then in high school became an English major, but with a drama emphasis. And so our class won a lot of awards. We performed at a lot of places, but I was also in the choir, and we did that too. That was a huge choir, and they had a lot of tours. And so I had a lot of experience in performing arts, and in front of people, and also then started doing some radio for a friend of mine who writes satires. And so we did this radio play, Buddy Shell, Metaphysical Private Investigator. and it was a satire on the radio plays of the 40s. And so we even had the kind of music in there, and since it was NPR, we did our own commercials, and so I got to write a lot of those commercials, and that was a real boost in my feather in my cap, whatever you want to call it, as far as my writing getting seen and getting out there. And I had written a few plays, and they had been produced, and then one of the shows I was hired to write for was to write lyrics. It was for a video, animated video called The Promise, Birth of the Messiah. It's available on Amazon, but it can be expensive right now because they've pretty much run out of stock. So if you can find it, it's worth it. And I got to write lyrics for most of the songs on that, or doctor them on that video. And then I was hired to adapt it for the stage. So I wrote the stage play version, found out it's been performed almost all over the world. I had no idea.
That's absolutely lovely.
That's something that God had given me to write has made it that far and has touched I don't know how many lives. I was also one of the key writers on the Passion Play at my church for 12 years. And they've kept a lot of my material. I mean, they change up every year. That's the goal, make it as fresh as possible. But for 12 years, I was one of the chief writers, as well as acting in the show. And I can't get over that either, because we reached at least 1,000 to maybe 5,000 people a year. And, a door-to-door evangelist never makes that kind of numbers. And so to stop and think that God gave me that opportunity is very humbling. I don't think I deserved it. And I didn't think my work was that good. And I guess that's a good thing, because once you start letting it get to your head, then it's not right. You're not doing it for the right reasons. You're not, your own self-worth becomes artificial. And there's no sense of honor to God, because it all becomes about yourself. And so that's how I'm trying to live. And I think the injury has done a lot for me to focus that way, on God's doing this, God's doing that, because I physically cannot. So it has to be him, because it cannot be me. So those are that's kind of the stuff I ruminate on. Some of it, I also had, this is going to be a ancillary story, but I've never had a cat in my life because I've been allergic. I like cats, but I'm very allergic. But my sister came home to live with us for a while, and she brought a kitten, and I was able to go to the Asthma Institute and get shots that worked. And I was the allergens was gone. I didn't have the allergy to the kitten, and the kitten fell in love with me. And when my sister,
adorable.
I loved this little cat. When my sister got married, her husband had 2 Rottweilers, and she was going to get a pit bull, and there was no room in the house for the cat. And they don't live far away, so she can come visit her cat anytime she wants. So she left her with me, and she became a little angel, literally a little angel for me. And I stopped to think, what are we missing that we lost in the garden? Our connection with all the rest of life and this planet that God has given us. And what have we lost? Because only in certain pets do we get that kind of just a touch of heaven, of what it's like to connect with just an animal. They're not made by God by accident. They're on purpose. They're here for their own reasons, whatever God has them here for. But this cat was very, very keen on trying to keep me healthy, and was very grateful and was very playful for anything that I could do for her. So when she got sick and she had to go, that was the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life. That was the hardest thing.
I understand that completely, because I lost my dog 2 years ago, a month before my grandmother passed away. And my dog had always been there for me. And when she declined rapidly in one day. She
Yep.
was losing. I'm sorry?
Yes, I understand that it was the same kind of situation.
I'm actually, when I look back on the experience, I'm glad that it happened so quickly. I'm glad it wasn't something long and drawn out, even though the vet told me when I took her to the emergency vet that she had been having seizures. And I wasn't aware of it. I would see her staring off into space as she got older, because she was 15. But I didn't know she was having seizures. I just thought she was getting old. And I would call her. I go, "Hey, Sarah, come here." And she wouldn't come. I'm thinking, oh, she's just ignoring me, not having a clue that she was having seizures. And so when she declined, it was very rapidly. And when at the end, I thanked her for being my pet, and just gave her a kiss, and I remember, losing my mind. I lost my mind completely.
Yeah.
But then 3 weeks later, I got another dog. Her name is Princess, and you may have seen her online, off and on, James,
Sure.
on my Facebook. And she is the exact opposite of my baby girl. And I wasn't sure if I could love her. I was not sure, because I was still mourning the loss of Sarah. Then a month later, she was tickling me, because I picked up and she was tickling me under my chin because she was licking me and everything. And all of a sudden, I realized I didn't have to love her like Sarah. I just had to love her.
Yeah.
And it was actually very freeing to understand that I could let Sarah go and embrace this dog, but I've never let Sarah go. She's still there in my mind. And the fact that you're talking about the lost world of Eden and what we have lost from the fall is something I think about quite often, because not every animal you can build those type of relationships with. Not every animal you can. So why particularly domesticated animals like dogs, cats, some sheep, goats, birds even, why do some animals gradually become our companions than others? So that's a fascinating topic that you brought up there. So what do you think your thoughts are on the subject?
Well, I saw a video that just blew my mind.
Go ahead, explain. Go ahead, expand on it.
Yeah, this guy had raised a lion cub from its infancy, a female lion cub. And it was in a preserve because these were cubs that had been abandoned or something. There was something that they couldn't go out in the wild on their own. They had to be taken care of. And this lioness had not seen this man for years, and she had become full grown. And he was going to go over and see her. She was in a caged area, or at least there was a fence. It was something she couldn't get through. And it was a very dangerous situation. And she was pacing back and forth, past the gate. He finally unlocked it, and she jumped into his arms. And you know how cats will rub your face with their whiskers?
Yeah.
That's a show of love.
Mm-hmm.
That's also a show of ownership.
Oh,
so
my.
She was loving him. She was rubbing her whiskers on his face, and her paws were over his shoulder, no talons extended. And he had to actually sit down because she was so big. And she sat with her back against him, and he could rub her tummy.
Oh my gosh. I'm first of all impressed that it's a lion.
Yes.
Very impressed.
That's a lion. That's something that will eat you. And it just loved him. And then all the female lions came and to play with him. And the guy shooting the video was saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" He says, "Yes, yes, yes, this is fine. I'm fine."
See, I would have been saying, "Are you okay?" from like the car,
yes.
shouting it out. "Are you okay? Are you okay?"
Why do I have to be here with the camera? Yeah. So that was amazing. And another one very similar. It was a male lion and was able to go back into the wild. And so this caretaker it was a different guy, had set the lion out into the wild, and then years later went back to where he dropped the lion off just to see what will happen. And it showed up, and with its mate, and it just ran up to him and loved him and rubbed his whiskers all over this guy's face, and then introduced him to the mate. I don't know how they communicate, but I know it has to do with the eyes the certain scent they put out,
Mm-hmm.
sniffs and the ears and everything. I'll say something. Anyway, eventually the female came around to liking this guy. So we're talking wild animals that could kill you, remember you, and remember that you loved them and cared for them. So there's more going on. There's something more going on.
There has to be. And that's why when the Lord said that the lion shall lie down with the lamb, when he brings all things back to what it was in its original state, we're going to be just as shocked about this as anyone else. He said a child will be 100 years old and we're going to get our longevity back, but it won't be sin-filled and sin-sick and sin-stained and sin-dominated. It's going to be
right.
incredible.
It's going to be all the things that we in our mind miss. And that was C.S. Lewis's whole point in his book, Surprised by Joy. He would get joy thinking of a fantasy world, thinking that he belonged someplace else. And that joy would be like the feeling before Christmas morning that every kid would get, what's Santa going to leave me? All the butterflies, all that excitement. And he says, if you're built in a way that you have to eat, well, there's food. If you're built in a way that you have to procreate, well, there's sex. So if you're built in a way that you belong someplace else, then there must be someplace else you belong. When she was talking, of course, about heaven. And that was a really eye-opening thing for me, because we're always looking over the fence to the next place. Where's the most perfect place? Where can I live that's the most perfect place? Well, there is none here yet, but that's something within us that is of our nature. We are seeking God, whether we realize it or not. We can tell people that we don't believe, but wait till you're in a foxhole, or wait until you've been given that diagnosis and you only have 6 weeks. Things are going to change, and they often do. And
I can definitely relate to that, because it's often in our dark moments that the Lord shines the brightest. As a friend of mine said, who owns a publishing company, he said the light shines brighter in the darkness, because they write they publish edgier Christian fiction called Crossword Alliance. Crossover Alliance.
I'd like to learn more about them, because my stuff isn't necessarily for every Christian.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll after offline, I'll go ahead and introduce you to him. But so far, dear listener, we've been talking to J.C. Egan. He's been telling us a lot about his life, life as an actor, director, producer, lyricist, and how the Lord has used his various avenues of creativity. And now we're going to narrow it down to his newest release called Innerworld. And Innerworld is a satire about children's books. And you may be wondering, how can you satirize children's books? And so we're going to get to it in a moment. But first, JC, I want you to tell us where the idea for Innerworld come from.
Well, I'm writing a series of books based on, I love Ray Bradbury. And Ray Bradbury always wrote these stories that took place in his hometown in Illinois. He gave it a false name, but it would be his childhood, and something would happen, something amazing would happen in quite a few of his books. So I'm from Illinois, and I'm from a town called Aurora. And so my fictional city where all these amazing things will happen is Bright Lights, which is what Aurora means anyway. So it's just slightly different. The topography is slightly different, and there's a reason. It is a gateway to many fantastic places, and many fantastic things happen to people that live in this city. And so there will be a series of probably 5 books. I've already got 2, but one I have to rewrite to connect it further to Bright Lights than it already is, and also to give a little bit more of a gospel message than it has. It's there, but it's not an inner world. It's in another book, and it's very subtle. And the book is very adult because it deals with a character who is a misogynist, a narcissist. He thinks he's God's gift to women, and he's also an idiot. And writing stupid people is very fun. And I had a lot of fun.
Sounds exactly like a charmer. an
Yeah,
exact
yeah,
farmer.
yeah. But he's not. He's really a cross between, Captain Kirk and one of the Dumb and Dumber guys.
You
He's
cannot put your mouth on Captain Kirk.
hey,
Okay,
look,
Captain
I
Kirk
am
is
as
my
much
captain.
a Star Trek fan as you will ever know, and I have an action figure of Captain Kirk right behind the computer.
Well, I have the trivia game.
Oh, you do?
Yes, I do.
Well,
Yeah, so I beat you. Look at me. I beat you. But go, I'm sorry, Jason. Go ahead.
Hundreds of action figures. I'm still a big kid. So, and that's where Innerworld comes in, is because I remember having so much fun reading Narnia and The Hobbit. And my books are satires because in that way I can also appreciate the style of Douglas Adams and Pratchett and other authors. Even C.S. Lewis wrote a lot of satire. And once you know that that's what it is, and that there will be humor, and that the humor is, in my case, is broad humor. It's warm satire. It's not against the it's not against Christianity. It's not against the people that wrote those books. It's, or even the style. It's just a comedy within that world. And what the comedy is going to come from, things that adults will understand. The children will love the adventure, the plot, the excitement, and some jokes they'll get. But the parents who read Innerworld will be able to tap into the socio-political satire and the religious satire, because there is definitely a mindset right now going on in the world, of group mindset, where you follow a leader that is not right, and they get behind this leader for no reason other than it's groupthink, and it's a kind of a 1984 type of life. And so the villain in Innerworld has that happen, to the point where these people that live in his city live on the shore of an ocean under the earth, and he tells them there's no such ocean, so they don't believe that there is one. They won't turn around and look at it. And the hero, who's this kid who is suddenly growing very old while he's in Innerworld, he only has so much time to do what gift he's been given to do, and we all know what that means. As Christians, we only have so much time to do what God has given us to do, and to not waste it. And so he's trying to tell these people, don't you know that there's this ocean behind you? You could get tidal waves, you could get all kinds of weather problems. And they said, there's no ocean behind us. Our leader tells us there's no ocean behind us. He says, well, turn around and look. And they won't do it. They refuse.
Sometimes the simplest things are the hardest to do, which is just to verify information. Just call, get a second opinion. It's very fascinating. And I like how you use the other worlds and some of the other novelists that you mentioned to kind of underpin what you said. And I like Ray Bradbury. I love The Illustrated Man. I thought those were some fantastical stories that he wrote in The Illustrated Man. He did one episode for Twilight Zone. He did one for I think Outer Limits too, the original Outer Limits, and a few for the 1980 Twilight Zone as well. I think he did 2 for those. I can't remember. But yeah, he was a great author. And when you put your writing in the same sentence and context as Ray Bradbury, C.S. Lewis, some of the other ones, do you think you are stretching it? You know what I mean? Or do you think like, no,
Yeah,
this is what it is?
that's always a worry. Every author has this worry: am I really an author, or am I copying somebody? But the thing is that, and it's other authors have said this, especially the famous authors, is that you learn to find your voice through your favorite authors. So my style doesn't sound like Ray Bradbury, and it no longer sounds like Douglas Adams. It sounds like me. It's me. In fact, I've had people say, I'm not so sure I want to read your book because I hear your voice in it.
That's incredible.
Well, you're supposed to. I wrote it.
But I think what you just said is actually quite profound, and that can help our aspiring authors who are listening, is that don't feel bad if you mimic one of your favorite authors, because eventually you're going to have your own style. You're going to develop that thing, that voice that belongs to you. And discovering that is by learning to mimic what you already like in a story. I write romance, and so I read a lot of romances. I like how certain romance authors say certain things, how they build tension and romantic tension, how they have subtle sensuality, things of that nature. And you can build from that, but you're eventually going to be inspired on your own. So these are things to take with you, dear aspiring author, as you learn how to write. And so you have Innerworld, you have the adults who are going to see some of the subtle themes there. You have the kids who's going to like it. So how long did it take for you to write? And I ask these type of questions because there are authors out there who are still working on their first book, and we want to encourage them too.
Well, this is my second novel or novelette. I still think it's a novel. I know it comes in under 40,000 words, but some people will say 30,000 is the limit before you call it a novel. I don't care. I wrote it until it was done. And that's
exactly.
How I look at it as I have to write so many words because that doesn't, then I start to fill it with stuff that it doesn't need. And which my first novel, which I will be rewriting, the Tales of the Astroforce I just told you about, that's going to get a rewrite and go with a new publisher, and it's not going to be filled with filler stuff that really didn't have anything to do with the story and really didn't say anything. So yes, you must continue writing. You can't stop. You should write every day. And I even consider all the stuff I write on Facebook to be writing every day, part of that discipline, because I almost always use a voice in what I write on Facebook, to the point where it gets some people mad. Don't joke about this. Don't joke about that. And I said, well, I'm a humorist. That's my job. That's what I do.
I think people forget that God gave us humor as well. Yeah. And it's one of God's understated qualities. And I've talked about this on the show before with another guest, James, and his name is Dave Waddell. And he said, I think I cracked God up. That's what he said. So he talks about why we need humor, especially when things are going wrong and you have to laugh or you'll cry, right? But you don't want to cry because you get a headache. So you laugh, and that actually releases you.
Your mind.
Yeah.
You can actually go and forget what's real if you don't allow humor. Now, my mom and I live together. She takes care of me because of my, I'll call it a broken back, but it wasn't broken. It was twisted. And then I take care of her because she's 93. So between the two of us, we look at our situations and we crack each other up. We just have a ball.
Yeah.
So our minds are sharp, and our, we're attuned to what is most important. And, I could go to her and say, look, the money situation, because of what's going on with the strike and everything, we need to just kind of hold back here or hold back there, or I need to do this or whatever. And she's completely for it, and then she'll make some joke about it, and it'll be very funny and very relieving, because it brings you down to earth and realize that we're here only temporary, and it's just a breath that we're on this planet. So what are you going to do? Jesus took joy. I like the way this guy portrays him in The Chosen. He takes joy in healing people to the point where he's almost laughing. And that's how I always saw Jesus in my mind, was someone who took joy in giving and loving, in feeding and in healing, and had to give that up in order to go through the cross. And then, of course, the resurrection. You could actually say what he says to Thomas could almost be tongue-in-cheek. Oh, I'm not a ghost.
Yeah.
It doesn't have flesh and blood as you see me to have. Go ahead, touch my scars. Touch them, they're there. And and then what does he do? He makes breakfast for them. one of the last times he sees them, and he cooks for them and he feeds them, his disciples. And he takes Peter for a walk, and he says, "So, Peter, do you love me?" He uses a different form of the word love, and he's friendship. And he says, "Well, you know I love you." He says, "Well, then feed my sheep." And he says, "Do you love me?" Which was more of the agape, "I love you," the I love you enough to die for you. And he said, "Of course you know I do." And then he said, "Well, then feed my sheep." So then Peter becomes this amazing apostle alongside Paul, and they built the church. And at that time, it was built on love, and it was built on joy. It was built on freedom, being released from a burden of sin. I don't think people understand what, I don't think we have a society right now that understands how sinful we are, how close to destruction we are in our society. I was going to write a book, a non-humorous science fiction book about a future city that a guy goes to, time travels to, where it was legal to purchase children for sex.
Mm.
And it was legal, all pornography was legal. And the society was so corrupt that it was going to be destroyed. And so I'm seeing that happen. I remember my youth pastor telling me, "You have to write this book. You have to write this book." And I never did. I think I will. I think it's still there in my mind to be written, but how, in what form, I don't know. A short story maybe, or maybe it won't be funny.
I think you bring up a good point, JC, because right now, children, if we don't protect children, then what are we doing here? Do you know what I mean? It's like children deserve the protection of adults, and there are adults who have and will take advantage of children. You hear about sex trafficking growing, and what has been absolutely astounding to me has been the media's response to Sound of Freedom with James Caviezel. Yeah. And they're ridiculing this movie, and I would honestly have to say, I would have thought rescuing children from sex trafficking is a good thing. I would have thought there's nothing you can say that's bad. It doesn't matter who did the movie, who wrote the movie, who's behind the movie. We can all get on board and help stop this awful, awful, awful thing that's happening right before our eyes, or as we turn the corner.
But then when you look at the media and you look at that one guy that was on a call, some sort of business call that was on the air, and he had been pleasuring himself during the whole time. He didn't even get fired. He got off with pay, and then was brought back to CNN. I mean, that's disgusting. That's not only disgusting, that's worth losing your job over. I mean, that's worth losing your career over. And that I don't know if you know that happened, but it did. And
I remember when it happened, because the jokes were out of sight. First of all, a lot of people were joking about it, but you kept thinking to yourself, back in the day, maybe even 10 years ago, you would have been way off. That would have, no, that could not have gone in any way, because you have to be decent or at least put on a facade of decency. And
well, when you're at work, which he was at work.
Yeah.
There's no excuse whatsoever other than a depraved mind.
You can do this at home. We don't have to be privy to it. Really. Yeah. You can do it at home.
It's not our business. Don't make it our business. And also, it's that mindset that it's okay in the media to be different when that difference is corrupt and the lowest you can go.
Exactly.
Is seen as being acceptable and should be embraced. And when we're told that in the preamble, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, we know this song, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and protect. There's another part of it's either the preamble or the Constitution where it talks about the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. But happiness also means excellence.
That's a good distinguishing point when we talk about it. So people say, just do what makes you happy, as if happiness is just some subjective thing. But right. Someone can say, I'm happy when I take advantage of people. Well, you say, no, you can't take advantage of people. But if you go with that frame and that train of thought, you're going to actually run it off the cliff. And we know that. And we see that now. So that's why I'm glad that you mentioned that in the world in this current society, particularly in the Western society, people don't want to call sin. They want to call it something else other than sin. But when for example, I have to tell the story. A friend of mine recently had a situation where this guy said, I'm not robbing anybody. I'm not stealing anything, because he was stealing something from, I think, his job. I can't remember what it was. And I said, oh, he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong. Steal his wallet. Let's see what he thinks about that. Yeah. And then it would switch all the way. But we don't want to acknowledge that sin exists. We want to say, well, just be who you are, be yourself, whatever that entails, as if God does not have standards. And then when the Lord begins to judge, he judges the church first. So we should be very thankful for that, because he gives us an opportunity to come back to him when we go off the deep end.
Which I see happening.
Yeah.
I see that happening, which I know we talked about, we touched on it earlier, but I do see that happening. I attend a church that is multi-ethnic. Everybody from every corner of the world, their background, their history, comes to this church, and they marry one another. They worship with each other. It doesn't matter what their politics are. As soon as those doors close and that worship music starts, everybody's holding hands. Everybody's hugging one another, giving a kiss on the cheek, a holy kiss. It's love. And that church just emanates that. And yeah, it has its problems because it's run by people. But the real core of why God has blessed this church is it keeps giving resources to those in need. It is a place you can go and be accepted as a human being, but also be taught to be an excellent human being. Not just to be a Christian, but to be a Christian of excellence and of maturity, holiness.
Salty, someone would say.
Salty, yeah.
Salty. Be salty.
Savory salt. You don't just go out and tell people they're going to hell. You go out and you show them the way. And you show them that the way is really worth it. Nobody except people who've been Christians long enough and who've matured long enough in Christianity realize what an exciting life it is. And here I am lying in a couch. I'm not out. I don't know if you saw Dial of Destiny, but it's great. And Indiana Jones is climbing the deal with his age, and he's climbing a wall of rock, and he stops. And the girl that's with him says, "Why are you stopping?" He says, "I'm thinking." She says, "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking, what am I doing 20 feet off the ground on this rock wall when I have two crab shoulders, and a steel plate in one leg and two bolts in another?" Like 78 years old. He's doing this. He still has a hat and his whip, and he's just realizing, I can't do this. But God can do through you many things, even if all you're doing is praying. And both my mom and I encourage that with each other, because prayer is the only thing we can do in a lot of cases. Now we do have charities and we do that kind of stuff. Most people give money to something. And so we without telling you, because I don't want the right hand to know what the left hand is doing, we do this. But in order for us to actually get the gospel out, I have to do what I'm doing, which is this podcast, the plays, and the books. And some of the books are going to be a little rough on some people. Tales of the Astroforce is funny. It's based on a play, but it's funny in an adult way, and it has to be. And because if it isn't, then you don't. Here's the thing I learned about comedy. I had to take classes. Comedy is an intellectual process. We don't think it is. We think it's a knee-jerk reaction. But if you don't get the joke, you won't laugh. So in order to get the joke, the process in your mind, which has to be lightning fast, has to understand why the subject is funny. If you don't go through that process, then you didn't learn something. And so we learn through laughter what is funny about our fallen nature that needs to change. And we can learn through laughter, oh my gosh, that's me. That's totally me. I see me in that character, or I see something I did in that person. And the only way I can deal with it is change. And I can look back at it and just, it's funny that I was stupid, but it's not funny that I did what I did.
I understand.
But then you see how God will take that and turn it around and make it into something absolutely beautiful and life affirming. And he does do that. He did it with me in a story that I'll keep secret, but I'll give a little bit of a detail. I felt like I was unworthy of ever going to church again, because when I was a lot younger, I had taken an acting course and had told this girl that I was a partner with that I was a Christian, but wasn't being very Christian-like with the scene that we were doing. And later that haunted me. We're talking nearly 20 years later. And I had been on worship teams, and I had taught Bible studies, and I had taught classes on cults and the occult, and I've taught all these things that I studied. And in my heart and my mind, I'm thinking, I can't go back to church. I had left the church, and because the worship team had basically disbanded. Something bad was going on in the leadership. I don't know what it was, but it was bad. And so I left too. And I was looking for a place to go. And my folks kept saying, try this church. I said, I don't think I can do it. So I drove past the church one day. I said, I can't go. I can't do it. And then I decided to go see the Passion play. And it was so professional. I've never seen a church give that much attention to the theatrical arts, that I was impressed with that. So then I decided I was going to go on a Sunday morning and hear the sermon. And the very person that was getting baptized that Sunday was the girl I did that scene with.
How incredible is that?
Now, what does that tell you?
Conspiracy, godly conspiracy. I love it. I love it.
I got a chance to approach her afterwards and apologize. And she said, oh, no, I had a great time. It was a great scene. So from her perspective, my perspective was a lie. Being lied to. I was being told, you can't go to church. You can't be part of church. You can't do it because you're evil. You're evil. You're a hypocrite. You can't do it. And so I end up at this church 20 years later, and here she is getting baptized.
Conspiracy. The Lord even knew then, and he orchestrated things then, so you can know that he has your back. It reminds me of John Lennox when he talks about the mathematical probabilities of his own story to salvation with Christ. And it lets you know it's just not random. There's nothing random about that.
Yeah.
Because
everything is measurable. Yeah. Everything is measurable. Everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how anybody could not believe in God and take astronomy.
Yeah.
And believe in God after taking astronomy.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to cut you off, but it sparked that thought in my mind that really, really solidifies the existence of God. In our universe alone, everything has measurement. That's not an accident. That can't come from nothing. We can measure the earth. We can measure the distance from the sun and call it an astronomical unit, and measure other areas of outer space with astronomical units and be accurate. That's not an accident. That's design.
Exactly. When I got into apologetics back in the day, that's where I put my focus was on scientific explorations about our world. And plus I'm a Star Trekkie. I'm a Trekkie. So of course, so that's going to happen. So, but I did that. And I'm so glad you mentioned it, because as we get ready to close our conversation today, one thing that you said that I think you should probably just expand a little bit on is doing what you can now. As you were telling us about your career through theatrical world, through the media, church, all these things, you did all these things while you could. And Jackie Chan, and we know who Jackie Chan is, good actor, he talks about how he can't do what he used to do. He used to do his own stunts, running around, jumping, flipping over buildings, breaking legs, getting back up, doing it all over again. And he said recently, probably about a year and a half ago, something like that, he said he can't do it anymore because he's getting older. He said, but he did it and he lived it. He could look back at all the things that he did. And you can do the same thing, JC.
And I do. And I'll tell you that that's one of the things that keeps me going, is because I'm not only wounded in the back, but I'm highly asthmatic. I have a blood disorder, so I can't have vitamin K or it will kill me. So I can no longer eat leafy greens very much. I have to really monitor it. I'm on medication for that stuff too. And so, and that's all medical science that keeps me going. But, when I wouldn't mind, just leaving shedding this mortal coil, if I may be so Shakespearean. But the truth is, I look back on my life and I went snorkeling off the coast of Catalina because my brother-in-law talked me into getting in the water. And this is an asthmatic kid who's, I did it. I rode horses. I climbed mountains. I went door to door. I went on adventures. I did things that I wouldn't have done unless I was encouraged to do it from some person or through God, through some person. I don't know, but if I hadn't have gone snorkeling that day, I don't know how much faith I would have put into God to keep his hand on me and on my breathing. And since then I have had double pneumonia. I've stopped breathing, ceased breathing. I have to have my medical inhaler by me all the time. And it's one of it sounds terrible, but you think about it, I did a lot of stuff in my life and I don't see it ending. I see other stuff. There's other stuff to do now. I can look back and say, yeah, I got to do that. 30 years on the stage. That's awesome. And being part of that union and being part of that family and getting to share Christ with people who were in the occult and were in lifestyles that didn't want to hear me, even though I wasn't talking about their lifestyle. I was just being loving and letting them know it's okay to love Jesus. And then moving from there to this position where I can do that through a humorous little story. And you wanted to ask me about why am I satirizing a children's story? I'm really satirizing a style. I love children's stories. I've read great children's stories. C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien are my favorite writers, and as well as Bradbury, and I have a couple others that I really like. But that's the reason I had to put a satire in that is that my agent wasn't aware that it was a comedy. And he talked me into going independent with it because he couldn't get a publisher to take it because of the subject matter dealt with the kid growing old, and they didn't think that would take with children's books. So I changed the title to a satire so that when people read it, they're going to know this is a satire. What's happening in it, in the story is to give me an idea, teach me a lesson, give me a laugh, show me humanity in a way that through a lens that has a twinkle in its eye. And you get, people like C.S. Lewis writing Screwtape Letters, one of the funniest books I've ever read. And total satire. Now, if he can do it, and the Lord has given me a heart to do it, I should not stop.
And I think that's a good place for us to end our show today, JC. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here with me today. I really appreciate having you and cannot wait to have you back and have you back real soon.
Anytime.
And we just had a wonderful conversation with JC Egan as he talked about his life as an actor, as a producer, as a lyricist, going and learning how the Lord can heal us from our own self-deception, how he helped him to write, brought people into his life, takes care of him even though he's dealing with lots of medical issues. Does this sound like you, dear author? And you're just sitting there saying, I can't do it because of X. But let JC's story be an inspiration to you. With God, all things are possible. And you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead, pick up the pen, and write stuff. Thank you so much for joining me for this edition of The Right Stuff. I'm the Queen, Parker J., and you have a wonderful, absolutely glorious, blessed day.